What do you think we should do for actually drawing attention to the fact that this is episode 100? Should I just say something just a little blurb about it, or do you want to spend a little bit at the beginning of the episode talking about it? Or do you have anything to say about it?
I think we should try to say 100 as many times as we possibly can until we're tired of it, like that meow sketch in Super Troopers.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Alien Familiar RPG podcast. I am Clayton.
Kyle Perkins here.
I'm Jordan.
And before we get started, you can find show notes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/alienfamiliarmedia. If you would like to help us out with hosting costs, you can do so at patreon.com/alienfamiliarmedia. And because if you like our content and you would like us to continue, any help you would be able to give us would be greatly appreciated. And thank you for joining us this time for episode 100 of our podcast. We've been trying to come up with a 100th episode topic for several weeks now. And over the course of these 100 episodes, we've talked a lot about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. But over the course of those 100 episodes, we've never actually given our opinion of the game system itself, whether we think it's complete garbage or whether we enjoy it. Hopefully, the fact that we've talked about it so much means that we enjoy it some. But this episode, we are going to be talking about our thoughts on D&D 5th edition.
About time, eh?
I've got thoughts.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start, Clayton?
I think I'll just start off by saying that personally, 5th edition is my favorite edition of D&D. I feel like it's a very solid, well-made system that does very well the things that it is designed to do. And the thing that it is designed to do is high adventure, being big damn heroes and busting down doors, getting into fights with horrible monsters and coming through at the end of the day and winning treasure and the adoration of the NPCs in the world in which you are playing. That seems to be the sweet spot for what D&D is designed to do and for what it actually does.
I think that's a very fair assessment. I've played far more 5th edition games than any other edition of D&D, and, I hadn't really thought about it until this moment when you just said that, but, I guess it might be my favorite too. I certainly know it better now than I ever pretended to know 3.5, which was my most played system. Never ran as a DM, but my most played system prior to 5th edition.
Oh, when did you learn 5th edition?
So how many sessions was the Wanderers, Clayton? 30-something, is that right?
At this point, I don't even remember.
Let's say session 25.
No, I guess I mostly agree with you, Clayton. I just feel like it's a little bit undercooked. That's kind of my overall take on 5th edition. I agree that for the most bare bones elevator pitch of what Dungeons & Dragons is, yeah, it checks all the boxes. But there's another part in there that is always kind of part and parcel with D&D, and we just brought it up, and that is a long-term play, the campaigns that span months and months. And it's there that I think that 5e starts kind of coming loose at the seams after you've jangled it around for that long. I'll go into it more why I think that later, but I think it's pretty purpose-built in my mind to be closer to like a board game or like a party game, something like that, than a game with enough detail and enough robust systems. And I'm not articulating this well. Anyway, we'll get into this more later.
Before we go any further, I reached out to our hosts who haven't been able to join us of late, and I want to go ahead and add KD's take on D&D 5th edition. I'll go ahead and insert that here, and then after that is completed, we'll come back to the rest of us and we'll talk kind of about some of KD's points and also kind of go off on our own points.
Kyle, thank you for joining us.
It's great hearing from you, Katie.
Howdy, y'all. It's KD here. Long time no listen, I suppose, or having been heard. Happy 100th podcast episode to Alien Familiar, and I hope y'all have been enjoying the things Clayton has been cooking up. I'm just dropping by to give you a little bit of my thoughts on 5th edition D&D, and honestly, I would have to say, despite having been very, very familiar with 3.5, that was the game that initially got me into D&D. My then girlfriend, and I played it in high school with some friends at the time. I feel like 5th edition is sort of in my opinion, a sort of natural evolution of where things were going. I didn't play too much 4th, so in my mind, there might be, that might be the missing gene link, so to speak. But I really feel like they took the game and the clunkier parts of it and really just did try to streamline it. I like, for example, that you can basically play any race you want with any class. I know in 3.5 there was a lot of certain advantageous matchups, just off the top of my head, half-orc and barbarian being one. And humans obviously still have that well-rounded versatility to them that makes them good in any capacity. But I do think that they really just made it a lot easier for people to pick up, and I know that that's given it sort of a reputation online of quote-unquote catering to casuals. But in my opinion, the more people in the hobby, the better. And if you have a system that works well and can be easily picked up by other people, then that's good. And that's not to say that there's not rules in 5th edition. I mean, there's plenty of fucking rules in 5th edition. But I do feel like in terms of kind of combat and sort of how you generate a character, that's been a lot more simplified. And I think even more so too, especially in character generation. Like, I think that's where the boundary for fun is for a lot of people. A lot of people have a lot of fun making a character. There's some fun executing that character, but I think for a lot of people, there's just something about having that period of character generation time and that excitement and that idea of raw potential. And I feel like 5th edition definitely helps you get that. It definitely helps you visualize what you want to do. And in addition to that, too, multi-classing is pretty easy. I didn't multi-class a whole lot in 3.5, but I've done it multiple times in the 5th edition games I'm in, and have been in. I know I did a cleric, warlock, monk hybrid in a 50 game that has since wrapped up that Clayton and KP and Jordan were in. And I'm currently in a 5e game, excuse me, that is, I'm doing a sort of homebrewed spell blade. I'm a warrior or a fighter and a sorcerer hybrid. And both of those have gone super well, and I've never really been confused about multi-classing, which I guess ties into, again, I really feel like it has such a succinct character building component. In terms of cons for me, I do definitely miss how skills used to be handled. I really miss feeling like you could really express a character's strategy and what they're good at through how many skill points they could distribute. And not having access to that does feel a bit bad sometimes. I know that proficiency has sort of changed the way skills work in this game, and there's definitely a lot less of, I have +8 to climb, or something similar to that. And that simplification that I talked about earlier did trickle down into skills, and maybe that's where I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it personally. But I do feel like a lot of the changes that were made were good, and I know plenty of people that really just are new to the hobby and have gotten their start in 5th edition. And I think that that's great. And I think that more so than anything else is a sign of success rather than, the longevity of the system or how, quote unquote hardcore nerds feel about it. So that's where I stand with it. I think that it being a gateway for people into more systems is definitely a good thing. So that's about all I have for my review. I just touched on a couple things, but I'll still play a human and love every second of it because I'm boring. And I hope that you all enjoy the rest of the podcast.
All right, so those are Katie's thoughts on D&D 5th edition. How do you guys feel about that? Particularly the points about him saying that the online consensus being that it seems to be catering to casuals. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I know that KD himself doesn't feel that way, but I think there is an air of casualness about the game. Jordan, it's funny, you called it undercooked. I think I'd call it overcooked. Something like an Applebee's hamburger, meant to appeal to the broadest audience and the broadest palates, but when you overcook a hamburger and slather it with ketchup and mayonnaise, you're missing the intrinsic tastiness of the beef. That's really all I have to say about that, but I think the analogy holds.
I think it wears it pretty obviously as an addition that it was designed by committee with a whole lot of focus group testing and all that. Like, it was very much a corporate effort to try to recover a brand that had largely been damaged by 4th edition. I mean, like, okay, Wizards of the Coast, they buy up D&D out of the rubble of TSR and then put out 3rd edition. And so they put out a version in 3rd edition where they're trying to, sort of prove themselves to the old guard TSR 2nd edition crowd, right? Then, after a few years, they, I think, start seeing players getting essentially wandering off to go play World of Warcraft and things like that. So then you see 4th edition that is obviously designed to try to draw those players back in. It's got like all of the trappings of that mode of play, and some people like that. And then I think that the whole goal of 5th edition was to get a much bigger piece of the nerd pie than D&D had ever gone after before. And all their design decisions are geared towards that. The getting away from stacked modifiers and making it a simple advantage-disadvantage system. Focusing a whole lot more on like how inventive and cool your character concept is, and really putting a lot of the mechanical game kind of in the back seat, in my opinion. I think it's probably the friendliest edition of D&D, and that's fine. But it's definitely sacrificed a lot of the elements that made me fall in love with the hobby when I was a kid who was way into all the little finicky bits of the system. Not to say that they're not there, it's just the system's clearly not designed for players like me anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I read basically a summary from one of the designers of 5th edition. They said that one of the philosophies of it behind 5th edition was having rulings be more important than the rules. So right there, you've got an admission from the designers that the game isn't going to be this comprehensive set of rules. It's designed to be this thing where a GM doesn't have all of the answers in a book. They're going to have to make calls at the table. And there's also statements from the developers that they and this plays out in the numbers, that they tried to make this they did try to make this a mass appeal product. And since the launch of 5th edition has been far and away the best-selling edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And we've had a level of pop culture penetration of D&D 5th edition that we haven't seen before, since there was a cartoon on Saturday mornings about D&D.
We're getting car commercials, like we're getting mainline shows aired on mainstream television doing D&D episodes in a bottle, so to speak. There's a reason it's the world's greatest role-playing game, and I say that with no sarcasm, frankly. It has superseded anything. It's Kleenex. It's not just facial tissues.
I was thinking about that phenomenon when I was preparing for this episode, and I'm not sure how much of that um, they deserve, the credit that they deserve for that from the game design. Some of it, yeah, they've definitely, made the barrier for entry much lower than before, but they weren't doing that in a vacuum. Over the course of, the last 10, 15 years, whatever, culture has entirely moved into nerdy stuff. The MCU and like you name it. Like if it's pop culture, it's nerd shit. It's stuff that back in the 90s was super niche. So it's got that appeal harkening back to, nerdy people's childhoods that, that whole retro thing is a big chunk of it. So I don't know. I mean, there's some element of this that I think was right place, right time. Should I just keep rambling, Clayton?
I was just trying to come up with a response. Yeah, I definitely just having like very popular, well-recognized actors who are saying, "Yeah, I play D&D" in interviews that they are doing, like Vin Diesel saying his character Riddick is based on a Drow character he used to play. Stephen Colbert having like talking about D&D on his on Colbert Report, and then on what show is his, like Late Night or something with Stephen Colbert. That isn't D&D trying to reach out to new people. That is people who played it in the past admitting, yeah, I've played this game. It is still awesome, and letting a whole new generation of people knowing about it. And I feel like with 5th edition, the designers kind of had that in mind because there was the start of having that there. And I feel like they just capitalized on that. And they did, in fact, they rode that wave in such a way that they got it to where it is now, where it is bigger than ever before.
Right, and you've also got YouTube and also D&D Beyond and Roll20 and all these other things that make it much more accessible. People can go online and see what Matt Mercer is doing and kind of get an idea of what it's like instead of just showing up to somebody's basement and sit in awkward silence while they figure out what role playing is. And they don't have to buy a mountain of books and, thumb through it for an hour. They can just download some shit on their phone and find it in 5 seconds. So a lot of the old barriers are gone now. And I don't know how much of this you can really use as praise for the design of 5th edition as such, so much as the right time. And also, Wizards has marketed this edition of D&D better than they ever have any previous editions. A lot of it has to do with those celebrities. I just saw on Jeremy Crawford's Twitter account not long ago, they had this big, celebrity D&D event or whatever, with, guys from like Silicon Valley and whatever. So yeah, they're using that as these celebrities as they find them, because they know that's drawing people in. It's a smart move. I don't know if that's an argument for why Advantage is a good system.
Are you saying Advantage isn't a good system?
I'm saying Advantage is a trash system.
Why is that?
Well, here's the thing. For one, it doesn't stack in any way. That's probably my biggest complaint with it. If I've got 2 things giving me advantage and 1 thing giving me disadvantage, I'm the same as if nothing was ever affecting me. And that's also true if I've got 15 things giving me disadvantage and 1 thing giving me advantage. I'm back to just neutral again. That doesn't make any sense. If you're trying to have any kind of, simulation of an actual physical state of things, and in any way acknowledging that, these different factors can make you better or worse at whatever you're attempting, it makes no sense to say that, well, then no matter how much is for you and how much is against you, if there's a factor or one or more factors on both sides, it all negates. That's absurd. And the way that it plays out in game is even more frustrating because it robs you of any opportunity to really tactically approach a situation beyond just that first advantage state. And so you don't have any reason to continue thinking about the situation. You don't have, you don't have to hatch some cool plan where you've got all your different pieces in place and then you execute at the moment of, maximum advantage. There's no such thing. And so I just think it's a really dumbed down system that, it's boring.
But it's a godsend for GMs who are trying to keep the flow of a combat going as quickly as possible. And they're sitting there. They no longer have to sit there and haggle with the player over what modifiers are in play on this particular maneuver that the player character is trying to do, while the DM is looking at the player who is sitting right next to them, who is sitting there rolling their eyes because this haggling is taking so long to figure out how many pluses are going into this next roll. And then 2 characters later, whenever you come to the character who's new to the game, they're given the same number of bonuses. And so they're sitting there trying to count, sometimes in their head, sometimes literally on their fingers, how many bonuses they have and add that to the number that they just rolled on their dice. I love it because it just wipes all of that away.
I've never heard this system described as rulings over rules, but you saying that at the beginning of this episode, like, I'm sitting here with mathematical calculations and formula flying across my face invisibly as I recalculate my opinion of D&D on the spot, 5th edition specifically, obviously. And it's, in that regard, in that light, so Jordan has 5 things giving him advantage, his character, and 1 thing giving him disadvantage. By the rules, sure. I'm fairly certain that as written, that cancels out into neither advantage nor disadvantage. But doesn't that give the DM the license, based on the theme of the core design principle, one of them, of 5th edition, to have the GM sort of house rule that, or make a ruling that you have overwhelming advantage, so that still applies? Can we assume that they were expecting something like that to happen?
No, because they explicitly put it in the rules that advantage and disadvantage negate each other under all circumstances. Like, they didn't have to write that in there, but they did. And that's stupid. I mean, if I was going to fix that system and still keep it as it is and not get into the math jungle that you're worried about, Clayton, I would say something like, if you have multiple sources of advantage, only one of them is going to apply to a given roll, but the rest of them are sort of padding if there are other things working against you, and vice versa for disadvantage in really bad situations that, okay, I've got 3 advantage and 2 disadvantage. Well, chop 2 off both sides and then I'm still up 1 advantage. And you'd never have 5d20 that you're rolling, but you'd still have some reward for, thinking through what you're trying to do and putting everything in play to work for you as best as you can.
But even that sounds like you're still counting bonuses. You're still counting, okay, do I have 2 advantages to negate this 1 potential disadvantage?
Mm-hmm. I don't think that basic addition and subtraction should be, something that's frowned upon. As a matter of fact, I remember having conversations with teachers in school about that being one of the cool things about D&D, that it improves your math skills. And if you're so bad at basic arithmetic that you can't do some addition and subtraction on the fly, you should probably spend some time to do that. It'll pay dividends throughout your life, I promise. Is that too asshole-ish about pluses and minuses?
Well, the thing about the design feature behind advantages and disadvantages are there's only so many prescribed ways in which you can get it. Usually the disadvantage is, well, either advantage or disadvantage is a feature of one of your classes, or if you're a spellcaster, maybe it's from a spell. That's the vast majority of the sources of advantage and disadvantage, excluding lighting conditions. So usually you are trying to, it becomes another resource that you are managing your class abilities, because usually those have some sort of economy to them. Whether you're a spellcaster who casts a spell that has advantage or disadvantage as an effect of the spell, or whether you are I don't remember off the top of my head, but there are some rogue abilities that allow you to use it and attack with advantage in certain situations. I feel like they've used the advantage disadvantage in tandem with this action economy in order to basically buff it up for being a really simple, elegant system where you're not only doing the rolls, but you're also managing some of your resources whenever you're using these abilities.
Numerically, as far as, if you listed what are the sources of advantage or disadvantage in the entirety of the D&D system, then yeah, the spells and class features and things are going to be the majority of those. But I think that it's worth mentioning that when you're actually playing and dealing with the situation on the ground, things like lighting and things like flanking. I know it's optional rule or whatever, but different stuff like that can come into play. And also, it's one of those things that I read it as being an open invitation to appeal to the DM, like, hey, I'm doing this extra cool thing over here. Maybe give me advantage on this, huh? And that's a thing that they could offer you if you come up with something particularly clever. I don't think it's, like we said before, the rulings over rules, I don't think it's necessarily a closed box that's supposed to be just the finite list that's given in the pages that can grant that. I'll completely concede that the third edition and fourth edition went way overboard on the amount of math that was involved. I get that it can slow the game down and all that kind of stuff, but I think there's probably a happy medium that they overshot into simplicity. And being a tactically minded player, I just find myself extremely bored turn after turn. Like, I'm just sitting here rolling dice, waiting for these numbers to fall right so that we can be done with this whole thing, especially when you get to the point in the combat when all those resources you're talking about have been spent and you're just down to that fucking basic attack slog until it's over. You know what I mean? Like, that is the worst. That's the least fun I ever have in D&D, those last, 4 or 5 rounds of combat that just won't end.
Yeah, I've basically got my notes written in 3 different sections, talking about the philosophy behind D&D, the rules of D&D, and the nitpicks of D&D. And that is absolutely one of my nitpicks, is that there isn't rules as written for ending a combat besides just utterly defeating your opponents. And exactly what you're saying, whenever you're the GM and you've done a number of combats, you can see that tipping point. You see exactly when the players hit that tipping point and the combat is no longer, the results of the combat are no longer in question. You know how it's going to go down, and it just becomes a slog to reach that point. And one of my nitpicks for 5th edition is that, and this has been a nitpick for every edition of D&D, is they still don't have good rules or good advice on how to end that. Even in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's really not a whole lot in there on how to manage ending a combat fun, because they almost always end with, okay, did I hit with this attack? No. Okay, next person. Did I hit with this attack? Yes. Okay. Did you do enough damage to take him down? No. Okay. Well, we got it. He's down to 1 hit point. Next person, roll. Every single time there's a combat, I feel like there is a point where it becomes that.
Yeah, and I think that's because players have so few. One of the reasons is because players have so few options to do really cool things. You know, like think about how that might resolve in like a TV show, a fantasy TV show fight. You know, somebody might sneak up behind someone and put a knife to their throat, and oh shit, okay, this guy's definitely going to be able to kill his hostage. So let's all stop and talk about this now. But the way D&D works, there's no fucking way to do anything like that. And so you're just down to knocking off hit points every single fucking round.
It makes me realize how much I hate the D20 as a core principle of Dungeons and Dragons. I hate how often rolls from 1 to 8 are just useless. That's 40% of your potential rolls. Useless.
Yeah, there's so much fail in a rolled 20. Like, and that's another reason why I push so much for being able to stack up bonuses and things like that. Like turns where you're just whiffing and there's not even like an interesting side effect to the fail. It's just miss. Okay, next. Wait 15 minutes for your turn to come around again. God, shoot me in the face.
Well, hopefully by the time you reach that point in the combat, everybody is out of the interesting things they could then do. And so it won't be more than just a few minutes for it to come back around.
Yeah, I don't understand why they've made the design decision with, especially with some of the martial classes. Like right now I'm thinking primarily of Battle Master. It doesn't make any sense that if I'm some trained swordsman who knows how to, you know, parry and disarm and all these cool things, that I can only do it like 3 times and then I just can't anymore. Why? I can keep fighting. I'll be fighting 3 hours from now because I can't do anything interesting to stop it. So it's not about endurance. So what the fuck? What am I empty on?
I see it more as your enemies are getting wise to your tactics.
That why? I could use it against a completely different enemy and still have the same amount of resources. You know what I mean? Like if I have 3 maneuver rolls or superiority die, whatever it's called, do it against 2 guys, wind up killing them, go in another room, fight a guy who's never seen me before. I still only got 1 left. You know, it's not about them learning about me. It's about me running out of something. And damned if I know what that is. This is one of the things that I picked up. I reread through large chunks of the player handbook in preparation for this, and one of the things that I noticed that sticks out like a sore thumb is it seems like in writing they tended to err on the side of can't more often than not. You know, it's if I compare the stuff that I could do as a player character in 5th edition to the kind of stuff that I could pull off in prior editions, every single rule that I look at seems like it's nerfed in some way. Do you guys get that feeling at all? Or is that just me? Like from spells to combat rules to class features, like you name it.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by nerfed compared to what and when?
Okay, so here's an example that is outside of combat. Social spells. Back in the day, you could charm person, you could do all kinds of cool stuff to, you know, be tricksy with your spells in 3rd edition or whatever. Now, every single social spell is garbage. They find out immediately that you're fucking with them. That sucks. Like, I never use social spells in 5th edition. It doesn't make any fucking sense to do it. They're trash.
It does seem like they pop off a lot less from what I've noticed. That's interesting. It seems like social spells pop off successfully far less frequently. I have noticed that.
Well, another thing is that there are so few spells, it seems, or effects, period, that do anything, even if the target. So let me reverse the way that I'm saying this. it seems like most stuff is just save or suck. And that goes into like a whole complaint that I have about the way that they've done Magic, where it feels like more like superpowers than anything magical going on. And the concentration system is a whole bunch of shit that I hate to start with, but you've really only got two kinds of spells. You've got like a point and click, fire and forget thing that they'll save or they won't, or you'll hit or you won't. And with damn few exceptions, that's just going to be what it is. And then the other things are, okay, I've got my one concentration spell that I've got up and going, and that's the only one of those I can do. So that's half of the spells that are no longer accessible to you, no matter what level you are. Like that's the way that I'd try to fix that is, every 5 levels or something, let somebody have another concentration spell that they can maintain. That way you could have a really fucking awesome wizard that's got like, all these different things going simultaneously, and he's just a real fucking avatar freaking out kind of madman. Like, that's cool. As it is, it's like everything's on like easy mode. Everything's on like, low key mode.
So you're saying you want your wizard to be able to both fly and be invisible at the same time?
Fuck yeah. And have a fucking globe of invulnerability. If I'm a goddamn 20th level wizard, I should be godlike.
For things like that, yes, I agree. But when it comes to whenever it comes to imposing those penalties on the enemies that you are fighting, from the game master's perspective, that's a nightmare to keep track of. That's probably the biggest takeaway from 4th edition that they got from all of the shit that you could pile on top of on top of enemies, and you have to constantly keep track of what is currently in effect. It's a nightmare for the DM to keep track of just on one enemy. If you got multiple enemies and some of them are under this effect, and some of them are under that effect, I never found a good way to keep track of it.
Well, the way that 5th edition's done it is that they just have an entirely different game system that all the NPCs and monsters are working off of, counter to the player characters. Like, even humans, you look in the monster manual at, a leveled, pirate or soldier or whatever, it's a monster stat block. And, there's nothing that behaves like a player character that is under DM control. And that's a little part of annoyance for me too, is that there's stuff that some of those NPCs can do that no player character can ever acquire, no matter what, career path or feat or whatever that they choose to take. I'm going down my list of stuff that I made here that I mentioned.
So what are your opinions on just whenever they are releasing content for 5th edition, the way they've avoided putting out so many splat books as what they've done in 4th, 3rd, 2nd edition, where in those editions, especially in 2nd edition, you literally had multiple books coming out each month as being different splat books that you could purchase. Whereas now with 5th edition, there's maybe 2 or 3 books that are published a year, and usually one of those is a big adventure. I feel like they've done a pretty decent job as far as balancing the amount of material that comes out for a particular class, so that no one class is getting much more love than any of the others. But on the other hand, most of the splat books that are coming out, I hesitate to even call them splat books. Most of the books that are coming out, they are not for players. They're usually for game masters, because they're either monsters, they're adventures, or we've had a couple of other things like Xanathar's Guide, which had some player stuff in it, but was still mostly for GMs. It's nice from the DM's perspective, because you don't have as much stuff to keep track of for what the player characters can do. But from a player's perspective, it does kind of get a little stale, knowing that you've got the 3 options that are in the player's handbook, and then you've got 3 additional options in Xanathar's guide, and then maybe a couple of other options that are from on the website that released in Unearthed Arcana. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there needs to be more options for the players, but then when I think about their game philosophy, the game design philosophy of making it accessible for people, keeping it limited is really good for people who don't play this game as much as I do. And that's the vast majority of players who play, are the people who play a game a week and they maybe only own the player's handbook.
I don't see how having more options for players who are deeper into it would make the game prohibitive in any way to more casual players. I mean, you've got, a pretty good pile of options, I guess, in the core book for casual players. And I guess, like, what you're saying does exist as far as the Unearthed Arcana, kind of playtest material. It's not official books, but, there's stuff out there that they kind of suggest that you could throw in. We just never play with any of that stuff. Like Xanathar's was the biggest expansion that's come out since the player handbook. It's been really the only one to speak of. Volo's had a bunch of monster races, but as far as like classes, that's it. And I mean, personally, there's only a handful of things that I would ever reach for in Xanathar's guide. Like the fighter didn't get shit out of Xanathar's guide, and I mean that's a class that I feel like has been shit on like more than most in 5th edition. But I guess going to a thing that Jeremy Crawford said in an interview that I watched, it really gave me some insight on how he thinks about stuff. It was a 2-part YouTube video about creating your own subclasses, and he talked about the whole process of how they make these things, and they're largely like copy pasting old stuff from other classes and just slightly reskinning it. He always starts with whatever the narrative niche is of that particular archetype you're trying to portray. And then the rules are kind of like the secondary part. And that seems to go all through his design. But he said something that really struck me. He said, if you see a game mechanic and you think, that's interesting, be suspicious of it. That's fucking lame. I just gotta say it. I think it's lame.
When I was running combat in Wanderers and I tried to introduce a bunch of stuff that I thought was really interesting from homebrew content, literally after every session, you two would come to me and be like, where the fuck did you get that monster? Oh, that's not an official release. Like, it was interesting how quickly you would detect when it wasn't something from Wizards.
I feel like I was the one who said that more often than Jordan did. Like, said that, like, that's not an official release.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like me at all.
But that is absolutely something that I say often. But yeah, after you've looked through the monster manual, you definitely see the patterns. You definitely see what they're designing the system to be, and you get a good feel for just being able to spot it when, well, that's outside.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a detriment of the system that it's that predictable.
From a player perspective, it results in a lot of very samey characters. Like, it's super easy. It happened in your game, Clayton, for 4 or 5 people to get together and make characters independently of each other. And then when you show up, it turns out there's a shitload of toe stepping going on, just because the differences between things in the player handbook are largely just whatever sticker they decided to put on the mechanic. But they tried to stop that toe stepping phenomenon by limiting players' options in the kinds of characters they could make. I think that's why you've got very shoehorned prescribed paths in each of the classes. At least that's my perception of it. But it seems like pretty lazy design, in my opinion, and especially when you factor in the whole proficiency bonus system in lieu of actually distributing skill points. Like you're gonna wind up with cookie cutter characters like over and over again. And when you try to multi-class and spice it up a little bit, even that doesn't work that great because a lot of times the class features are redundant and built to not stack with each other. So you'll have like whole class features that are like, you get proficiency in this skill and that skill if you don't have it already. Well, what if I do have it already? Go fuck yourself. Sweet. Thanks.
Along the same lines, I didn't intend to do this, but I'm a player in 2 different games right now. In one game, I'm playing an archer ranger, and in the other game, I'm playing a warlock. And it occurred to me, the most recent game I was playing in, that mechanically I can't really tell the difference between these two characters, despite the fact that they're supposed to be completely different classes. I'm using these ranged attacks. I have a couple of go-to spells that are, whenever you read the books, yes, these are the spells you want because they are far and above the best abilities for you to have at this level. And I'm playing and I'm shooting my Eldritch Blast, and I'm casting Hex on my enemies so that I can deal extra damage. And then the next time I play in another game, I'm playing my Ranger, and I'm using my longbow, and I'm casting Hunter's Mark so that I can deal extra damage whenever I hit this particular enemy.
Yeah.
You don't have to dig through long arcane lists of, arcane items in order to make your character interesting. I am someone who does not have the patience to dig through all of this shit to kit out my character. I never have, and I never will. And as a result, I'm becoming bored out of my skull. I'm in 2 5th edition games, and the games themselves and the people running them, there's this Clayton guy, he's kind of a shithead, but
yeah.
For the most part, the games themselves and the people in them are what keep me in the games. The plot's interesting, I'm liking it in both of them, but I'm playing a ranger and a rogue, and there's just nothing. There's nothing for me. It feels so mundane. It really does. I don't know. I feel like there should be enough interest in the character and in things to look forward to in the future. Even at lower levels, which we are, I shouldn't have to go dig through random lists of magic items to make my character interesting.
Dude, this is the price that we pay for this simplistic design. And I think that they buy into this old fucking dichotomy that I absolutely and totally reject. And that is this old split between narrativist and simulationist gaming. I think it's horseshit because I'm telling a story through the mechanics of this game. It's the only Lego blocks that you have to represent it in an objective way that others can interact with. That's not just like, well, I think it ought to be blah blah blah. No, here's our virtual objective reality that we're playing on. It's the terrain of the game system. And when you represent it in such low resolution as what happens in games like 5th edition that are trying to be elegant, and I get that, trying to be fast and approachable, I get that. What you wind up with, though, is this like really mushy, uncustomizable, bland experience. And there's no mechanically meaningful way to express the things that are unique about your character outside of the rote class abilities that they've decided this is what a cleric looks like, this is what a druid looks like, blah blah blah. The whole thing feels very rehearsed at this point.
For a lot of this episode, I've been trying to come up to counters for a lot of what you've both been saying. It's no secret at this point that mechanics, and especially talking about them in this setting, it's not my forte. I kind of feel like a dude at a party who's about 12 Bud Lights in, and everyone else is like sipping on sherry and like weird, fucking alcohol with like small little critters that have been fermented in it. And some dude's brought over his like homemade beer that he made in his basement. And I'm just like, hey dudes, I got some more Bud Lights here. And no one wants them. But that aside.
Before you go any further, point of fact, I am drinking alcohol that I made myself. I'm drinking mead right now.
I should be drinking, I'm not.
Well, my point is that there's a lot of wonderful... There is a culture, and there is a lot of wonderful, fantastical visions that can come from D&D. And I've seen it with the middle schoolers I run games for, with my friends, with most people who find D&D 5th edition to be their go-to, I can't wait to play another D&D 5th edition game. It's because Dungeons & Dragons, as a world, as a concept, as a collective hallucination, it's great, and we know that. But this conversation, more and more, is kind of making me realize that if you can, and it's difficult, if you can put aside all of these things that we already know is good about Dungeons & Dragons as a series of games, and as a universe, and as a phenomenon, and look at the mechanics... Well, I'm having trouble coming up with countering points to a lot of what's being said.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think a lot of the affection for 5th edition is really just affection for Dungeons and Dragons as a brand as such. I think that if you slapped some, no-name fantasy nonsense onto it and tried to release it, it would flop. It's a lot of goodwill from the community. That keeps it going. And also, I wonder for a lot of these new players that are really having a great time. I'm sure they are. I mean, I remember having a great time when I started. But I wonder if they would necessarily have a shitty time if they played something a little bit more complex after this. Like there's nothing beyond just the entry level stuff that D&D 5e offers. That was another thing Crawford was talking about, is that the game, for one thing, doesn't really start until 3rd level, and it's sort of intended to end by like 10th. Like the high level stuff, they never really even intended for people to play, except for like random one shots to see what it's like to run around as a 15th level character for a session or two. So it's lazy, I think, the design of this.
Well, they did a survey, and like whenever they were designing 5th edition, and one of the results of that survey was that like something like 98 or 99% of players never played above level 10.
Yeah.
Just because either the games didn't last that long, or whenever they did play at level 10 or above level 10, they started at that level.
So I wonder why they don't try to make a game that is compelling at every level, rather than just saying, hell with it, we'll make the bottom half of the levels the only ones that anyone cares about, and the top half are just there to finish it out, because traditionally you go to 20th level. Like that seems like a thing that they identified that they should have put some work on, and not just been like throwing their hands up and said, hell with it.
Well, the sweet spot for D&D and pretty much always has been like basically like level 4 or 5 up until like level 10 or 11. And whenever I run a game, I am pushing it to reach like level 7 or 8 before I am burnt out on whatever setting I'm running, and I am just itching to play something new. I want to play something different. I've had so many other cool ideas that I have had over the months that we've been playing this current game, and I just want to play these other settings. And since I'm the game master, I can decide whenever the campaign is over and it's time to move on to something else. That's in my experience why my games don't last. It's not anything mechanical. I just lose interest.
We also decide what the pace is. You decide how fast we level. If you just decided for your Eberron game, for instance, that at the end of every session you level up, we'd be like, what, 11th, 12th level by now? We'd be seeing parts of the game that I've never seen in 5th edition. And like that's kind of the tragedy there for me, is that there's this whole experience of being those top tier characters that, we can just travel the planes and get involved with fucking demons and dragons and crazy shit, all the stuff that's like advertised as being the cool shit that you're supposed to have run-ins with in D&D, but you're actually just going to be slogging away at, fucking orcs or whatever for however many weeks until you get tired of that. You know what I mean? Like, let's play Spelljammer as like 18th level characters. That'd be fucking sick.
Something that you see right from level 1, and it's always there, no matter how high you play, and it's always garbage, is the damn proficiency bonus. It's something that's like haunting you no matter where you're at. And I hate it. I hate the proficiency bonus as a concept. I hate the way it's implemented in this game. Why is there some, like, semi-hidden modifier that improves as the character levels up, in addition to the other elements that improve as you move towards interesting levels and interesting abilities and content? Why is it, like, arcane knowledge to know when to add the proficiency bonus and when not to add it? Like, I understand experienced players, to them it's second nature, but teaching middle schoolers to play D&D, for instance, has taught me that, like, they understand skills and usually attributes, but the proficiency bonus is just this little lurking goblin that occasionally gives you a bonus to things and never feels part of you intrinsically like skills and attributes do, and like spells eventually do for spellcasting classes.
That is one thing that I feel like they did right. I've shit on D&D this whole time, but one thing I want to throw in there that I'm really happy that they did do is that for a lot of spells, they tied it to your level, or it gave you the ability to upcast with a higher slot. That's a fucking good design decision. That's, make my magic missiles still relevant when I'm, 11th, 12th level, whatever. That's good work. But yeah, I see what you're saying, Kyle, about the proficiency bonus. I think if they're going to have something like that, it should be separate from all the other shit. It should be just by virtue of your level, you're getting better at everything. And so you add your proficiency bonus to every single thing, so you're never going to whiff on a goblin again. And then also have some discretionary skill points to throw around to personalize your character. I think that'd be cool. Like, the proficiency bonus could serve an interesting mathematical function, just to pad out a lot of that empty space in the D20 that we were talking about before. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What do you think about the proficiency bonus, Clayton? I haven't heard from you in a while.
Well, a lot of what Jordan said. I see why it's something that only goes up at certain prescribed times, and it really doesn't go very high, because especially in 4th edition, that the proficiency bonus went up every other level. And it caused, I see why they did it this way, is so that even a level 1 goblin, or even a goblin you would have faced at level 1, still has more than just rolling a natural 20 and getting a critical hit chance of hitting most characters, no matter what their level. So it's kind of to help make sure that even low-level monsters can do something to you. But on the flip side to that, even high-level monsters don't have that great of a 2-hit. And once your characters get to probably about level 4 or 5, you're probably at your max armor class. The only way your armor class is really going to go up is it might go up a couple of points from getting additional magical items, or you might gain another special ability that increases it to some degree. But it's really, your armor class is going to be pretty much set around level 4 or 5. And I'm not sure whether I think that's a really good thing or if it's a really bad thing.
One thing that I think that I would house rule if I ever ran a 5e game. I would do something about hit points and the death save system, because I think it's just, this game's way too survivable, and it makes it uninteresting. Having 3 shots to make a 50-50 roll, that's ridiculous. You're nearly guaranteeing that you're going to survive anytime that you get dropped. And with everything having so many hit points, including including the player characters, it drags out combats well into the zone where it's no longer fun, like we were talking about. So I'd probably do something like, you get a very low static number of hit points each level. Like, if you're a wizard, you get 1. If you're a rogue, you get 2. Like something like that. And keep those ridiculously high hit points down, because the weapon damage doesn't really go up. The weapon damage is pretty damn stable, and so you're not making the combat any more exciting, really, especially for the martial classes. So I don't know, it's just a thought I had. Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about doing something similar to that. Conversely, like, I agree that probably after level 3 or 4, it becomes incredibly hard to kill player characters. But level 1 and level 2, man, it is so easy to kill player characters. I'm playing a pretty, I don't know, I guess deadly game on Thursdays. And part of that is the fact that I made the player characters, or that made the characters, made the players roll their stats straight down the line, 46, no rearranging. You first roll your strength, and then you roll your dex, and then you roll your con. And then after your stats are rolled, you just figure out what kind of character you can make from that. So
holy shit, I haven't heard about anybody doing that in years.
So most of the characters now are level 3. Either they just reached level 3 or they've been level 3 before the previous adventure, and it's kind of leveling out. But we've played like 10 sessions, and I've had like maybe 8 PC deaths in the game so far.
Wow. So are you coup de grace-ing these down characters? Because I find it hard to believe that they're all failing their death saves that consistently. So I could see how that'd be easy to knock them all out. But is someone going around cutting throats after this is over?
No, this is just really crappy rolls on the player characters' faults, or on their
high damage rules.
Yeah, I'm consistently rolling critical hits against them while they're incredibly low, and at levels 1 and level 2, a critical hit whenever you're at 1 hit point is very likely to take you all the way dead, straight up, full stop. So that's happened a couple of times, and even like with as swinging as combats can be at level 1 and level 2, where most creatures that are in the monster manual, even CR 1/4, if they get a crit, they're going to deal them enough damage to be your maximum hit point, so you're going down. So I've had a lot of instances where the tank gets a critical hit, gets critically hit the first round of combat, and goes down. And the group is scrambling to get them back up and keep them up, because I just happen to roll 3 crits right in a row. And I'm doing this on Roll20. All of my rolls are open for the players to see, and they're just horrified as they watch these natural 20s just come out of the random number generator. So one of the ways that I would probably fix that, if I were to take your suggestion, Jordan, and just have like higher levels give a flat hit points and be a relatively low number, I would start like at level 1, start it a little higher. In 4th edition, you got your Constitution score added to your hit points.
I loved that system.
And I think I would do something like that, because it fixes the problem of not having enough hit points at level 1 and 2. And then once you get higher, just having an ungodly number of hit points that takes forever to slog through at higher levels. So I would kind of mix and match those where you have your con is straight up part of your hit points. And then higher levels, you don't get as many hit points.
Yep, I like that a lot. Oh, one more precious few bit of praise for 5th edition I would offer is I'm really glad we don't have to confirm crits anymore. I think that's a good design decision.
Hell yes.
Oh, I have an unrelated point of 5e praise, but I can hold it if you wanted to elaborate on that more.
No, I was going to start something about inspiration.
Well, briefly, so I like personality traits, ideal bonds, and flaws. They're kind of cool. Brainstorming lists, a table to roll on, making a character, but more importantly, I love backgrounds. I think they add very interesting little elements to character creation and kind of gives you what feels like free things that I find myself falling back on quite a bit in early levels of the game. And I also really like tool proficiencies. I think they were handled pretty elegantly. That, again, separate from proficiency bonuses, but like tool proficiencies and using that tool proficiency with an attribute, for a role, I think is pretty cool.
I also like... Go ahead.
I was going to sing its praises as well. I love backgrounds, and in 5th edition, I like how it's another thing besides race where it's something that you have at the very beginning to kind of give your character a little bit more flavor. I wish they had gone a little bit further with backgrounds. I wish they were a little bit more beefier. I wish they gave you, I would go as far as to say that I wish the backgrounds gave you more than what your race did. As it is right now, backgrounds are about the only source of tool proficiency. Another thing you mentioned, I love the idea of tool proficiency, but I hate the fact that I am stuck with a tool that, sometimes I get a tool or two with my background and maybe with one with my class. And in game, in the rules, I have to spend like 200 days training in order to gain a new tool proficiency. I feel like that's another wasted opportunity. I wish that backgrounds came with more tools and tools that you could select. I love that you get a couple of tools, but I really want to be able to do that customization for my character and just make, Jordan, you've said customization is an area you wish there was more of. Yeah, I feel like this is somewhere that it wouldn't be hard to make backgrounds beefy enough that you could really make your character stand out from every other fighter that is walking around, besides just, I was a soldier, and so I have proficiency in land vehicles.
Yeah, I agree completely. And the customization stuff, especially as far as like the skills and things like that. And every time I'm making a character and I'm picking my character skills and I look at that super limited list of skills, I always think like how arbitrary and petty. Like they've already funneled me into only being able to assign, trained or untrained to these skills. And then they're going to prohibit me completely from taking other skills. Like a fighter can't take stealth. What the fuck? How is this guy even still alive? Like I hate shit like that. Yeah. More skill selection, please. And I love the tool proficiencies as well, but could they please have spent maybe, 20 minutes working out a reasonable crafting system? Like, if you don't have a good mechanic in place for how people are supposed to make all the different things that they might want to make, you're cutting out like 1 out of 4 players who are going to sooner or later want to make something. You're just going to pretty much tell them no, or it's, prohibitively expensive or time consuming or otherwise difficult. So go back to clobbering goblins.
Yeah, one, kind of bouncing off of that, one area that I feel like they potentially could have been really cool and they did put some thought into was the background activities that you can do between adventures. I love what is in there, And it's one of those things where I wish there was more. And apparently the game designers did too, because there's a huge section of Xanathar's guide that expands on the background activities. But even that, I feel like, man, that's a really good start.
Yeah, I love the ideas. I love the categories of things that they've listed that are interesting little mini games of downtime activity. But when you actually, again, the system, when you actually dig into what numerically has to happen for various effects for a player character, 9 times out of 10, you're better off not doing any of that shit. And I just get so fucking frustrated looking at that list because, like you, Clayton, I see so much potential there, but the execution is just botched, in my opinion.
And that was a design decision to kind of make, like, it goes into the design decision to make the game try to be modular, where you can just drop things in and take things out. I really like that, but I feel like they didn't go far enough as to show you kind of under the hood how you go about doing that. Like backgrounds. You look at 5 or 6 backgrounds and you can see the formula there of how to create a background. I don't remember if it's stated in the player's handbook or in the Dungeon Master's Guide just how you go about creating a background. It's incredibly simple, but most of the modular things, most of the things that they've designed for you to be able to put in and take out, they really haven't gone into the explanation as to how exactly you do that.
Yeah, for a game that is relying so much on the DM improvising, yeah, there is very little explicit, instructions in how to add to this game in a coherent way, and I think it suffers for it. Holy crap! Go ahead.
I feel like the resources for they put a lot of resources in there for the game master, but I don't think that the resources that are in there help the game master to really understand the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't spend much time explaining their design decisions. And that's something I've been wanting to see since I first picked up this game. Is like, can I just have, the manifesto that Crawford and Merles were going by when they were making these decisions? Because in the places where it is coherent, you can kind of suss out that there is this design philosophy, but it's always this thing that you have to, just kind of like figure out by pattern recognition rather than it, being very explicit in many places. But going along with like these weird systems for DMs and stuff, I'd love to hear what the two of you guys have to say, being the only two here that have actually run the damn game. Could you tell me about your experience with the experience system?
Kyle, I'll let you go first.
My experience with the experience system?
Yes. What are your thoughts on the experience system?
I've never used it as a GM, and I never will. And as a player, I find it to be about as enjoyable as doing my taxes.
This is another area where they drop the ball from learning from the mistakes of 4th edition. The fact that there are supplemental rules in the Dungeon Master's Guide for just ignoring experience points, or using experience points but just giving player characters, okay, this is the number of experience points you get for your characters each day that they are out adventuring. I feel like it's just a bunch of unnecessary math on the Dungeon Master's part whenever you've got so much other stuff you need to prep. I don't want to go through and add together the fact that, okay, I've got, as an example, my Thursday night game, I've got 3 players who are level 3, and I've got 1 player who is level 2. Therefore, I have to take this amount of experience points, multiply it by 3, then take this amount of experience points and add it to that. That's my budget for this encounter, for it to be an easy or medium or hard encounter, and try to figure out how to balance out the the encounter based on the experience points so that the player characters can reach their next level in so many prescribed encounters. It becomes it's like doing my taxes. I don't like doing my taxes.
Yeah, it looks terrible. And I mean, I've read it. I've read what they have to say about it in the books. I've never actually had to do my fucking taxes, but it looks like a goddamn nightmare. And every new edition is an opportunity for them to like really fix some problems. And experience has always been a fucking problem. Like, we've been playing D&D as a society for fucking 40 years, and we can't figure out a better way of doing this yet? Like, you gotta be kidding me. And there are other games that have worked it out in other ways. I think that's, I don't know. I don't want to come off as like a salty traditionalist, because I think there's a lot of new shit that's outside of the box that they could have done to really fix some of the legacy design problems with this game.
I wish the milestone system had been the default leveling system in 5th edition rather than clinging to experience.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot more sense. Can we talk about inspiration a little bit? I feel like this is one of those spots where they tried to reach for something that they've seen in newer generation games and tried to implement it in 5th edition, but I'm unimpressed with how it worked out. How do you guys feel about inspiration? Do you find it inspiring?
I think I feel like they carried an idea over from other games that have done it much better, and they tried to put it into the D20 system, and this is what we got, and most of the time it's something that is forgotten. I can count on one hand in the last 3 months where players have remembered inspiration, or I have remembered inspiration. And I'm a part of 4 games right now. It's just another spot on the character sheet that people forget whether or not there's anything there, and people forget to like mention that this is something that they can either gain or then use. Most of the time, I couldn't tell you whether or not my characters have inspiration or not. And most of the time, in a clutch situation, I'm usually not thinking about it. I'm thinking about other things. I'm trying to come up with something in the situation in order to gain that advantage, rather than, oh yeah, I've got this spot on my character sheet that says I can just do advantage whenever I want.
And half the time you don't even need it, because if there's any other factors at play, it's irrelevant.
But to be perfectly honest, I've played a lot of other games that use something similar to inspiration. Savage Worlds has bennies. Fate System has fate points. I can't remember what the name of the one in Dungeon World is, but in those systems, I still forget. It's just the way this type of a game feature works, is that I forget about it most of the time. Jordan, even in Apocalyptia with luck points, I forget about those most of the time.
Mm-hmm. I really like having some kind of clutch resource that I can draw on when there's something that's happening that I really, really want to succeed at, beyond just whatever the random shit is that my class features give me, but something that everybody has access to. I love bennies. Obviously, I like luck points and all that kind of shit. I think it's cool to give characters that specific moment of, if it's not a guarantee, at least a much better chance of asserting agency on the path of the story. And I think that to fix inspiration, for one, I think there should be more than just one of them at a given time. That's a lot of the reason why it's so forgettable. We've got spell slots, we've got superiority dice, we got key points and sorcery points and whatever. There's all sorts of bins of bonus whatever that players are managing. This one I think is pretty forgettable because it's just a binary. You have it or you don't. But if you have multiples And if they came back every session or every day or something like that, so that you're constantly reminded to keep up with them, or maybe you get one every day or whatever the system is, something to make you interact with it more. And if it was better than just advantage, if it worked more like luck, where you've got an actual extra D20 that you're throwing in there, right, hell with it, just make them fucking luck points. Like, get rid of inspiration, act like everybody has the luck feat. That's the system that I think it ought to be. And I do like what they were reaching for, let me justify why I should get another one because it has to do with my background or whatever. I think they're probably borrowing from how World of Darkness worked with willpower points on that kind of stuff. I like that system. I just think that they just really kind of squeaked out a little turd on this actual follow through on the idea.
There's nothing more disheartening than having a point of inspiration, spending it, and on your first roll, you rolled like a 4, and you spend inspiration, and then you roll like a 6, and you're just, well, there goes everything I want to do for the next turn to 5 turns.
Yeah, would it really?
Yeah, but rules as written, you got to declare the expenditure of experience or inspiration before you start rolling.
God, throw that out the window.
Oh, dude,
Fuck,
I don't even
fuck
play that way
rule.
to the point that I forgot that was as written. Wow, that's awful. I forgot all about that. Ugh.
Would it really be that game breaking if it was just a success? If you just gave players, 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever successes a session, you're still going to be rolling damage dice. It's not like you're handing out crits. And if it's a skill, then they're probably just trying to forward the story along in some way. Like, who's going to lose it if somebody can just throw out a couple of successes when they really need it?
Seems like that's one of those holdovers from the old school, crunchy, difficult days. That experience proficiency bonus and its arcane usage. Like, there's a few little things in there that don't seem to fit with their design philosophy. Rulings over rules.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the new generation narrative games have full-on mechanics where, like, here's the next story point, and I'm declaring that because it's my turn as a player. What was that, like, Coen Brothers type of game that we played, Clayton? It's like a murder mystery kind of thing.
Fiasco, yeah. That's all that game system is. And nobody's losing their mind about that, but it's like they were kind of wanting to entice the, theater kids that would be into that sort of thing, but they just didn't get the best of it. I don't like that it's a resource that the game master gives the players. Jordan, I like your idea of either making it something you have at the beginning of each session, or there is something that is done that you automatically get it, because Game Master has enough things in their minds going through trying to keep track of everything to just add one more thing that the players more often than not forget about as well. That said, I still ostensibly use inspiration in my games. The way I'm running it in our current games is that inspiration is something that, as if the player characters recognize that they've done something that follows their from their background, their ideals, their the things that Kyle was mentioning from the backgrounds that you roll on to see your character's beliefs and stuff like that. In my games, if you do something like that, you can let the game master know, hey, I did this thing, and then I'll say, okay, you got your inspiration point. That's the idea behind it anyway.
I know we're getting a little long, but I'd like to bring up one more topic, and this is the last one that I have. How do you guys feel about how the classes are balanced against each other in 5th edition? Would you say that there's a best class?
I don't know if I would say there is a best class, but there are definitely classes that every group should have. Like, if you don't have the 4 core classes that have existed in D&D forever, you don't have a melee tank, you don't have a healer, you don't have a sneaky shooty type person, you don't have a like dropping AoEs and massive spell casting class. you're gonna have a harder time.
Mhm.
I don't know if there are any truly garbage classes as well. On the flip side of that,
You ever played a ranger or a monk?
playing one right now. Have not played a monk.
The ranger is so bad that Wizards of the Coast released a revised ranger that's supposed to be like the replacement ranger, because the one in the player's handbook is just garbage, and they have data on it because they've looked at what people have built. Like, I think Wizards is using D&D Beyond as basically a data mining for how people actually play D&D. And yeah, Ranger is pretty universally considered trash, and the monk has been for every edition I've ever seen it in. However, I'm playing a revised Ranger in a game, and it's good. I feel like it's a solid class. I don't think it's overpowered, but you can really make an effective Ranger with the new features, or the revised features for Ranger.
Yeah, I'm playing the revised Ranger in my Saturday game as well. I'm enjoying it so far, but I've only played like three sessions so far.
If I was constructing that group, and I agree with you, Clayton, that those 4 traditional roles are essential still, and I'm fine with that. But if I was, doing interviews for who the tank is going to be, in previous editions, especially 3rd, I would have wanted a fighter in that role. Not in 5th edition. I would 100%, I got it in there, go with the paladin. I think the paladin is head and shoulders above every other martial class in 5th edition.
Yeah, the paladin has I played a paladin in Kyle's Wanderers game. I could deal damage like nobody else. Like, if I wanted to, I could out damage the rogue. Like, if I wanted to blow through my spells as quickly as possible, which is what I did in that final fight, I can take out pretty much anything that is within several levels, or within several difficulty levels of my class. I pretty much soloed the main boss in our final fight because I was just able to unleash holy hell upon that demon.
Yeah, and it's not like you're even just like a glass cannon or anything either, because you've got crazy good hit points. You've got probably the highest armor class you can get. I mean, you see what I'm doing with that Warforged in your game, Clayton. I'm fucking untouchable. And on top of that, you've got not only cure wounds and whatever else, but you've got your own reservoir of lay on hands that you can drop whenever you want. Like, what else would you want out of a class? The paladin is fucking OP as shit. There's nothing it's missing.
Well, we've definitely not gone over half of the points that I have, but we are running a bit long, and I don't want to go too long on this episode. Are you guys comfortable with wrapping it up here?
Sure. Sorry for hogging it. I was just talking.
I've got, I think, a small elaboration on my hamburger analogy as my final point. I'll bring it back around. I go to Applebee's. I expect a hamburger. I know what I'm getting. I'm going to order it medium, and they're going to give it to me medium well. It's never going to have any pink in the middle. I'm going to ask for no sauces. They're always going to put on their crazy special mixture. Doesn't matter. The veggies are there. They're not crisp. They're not fresh. But, I'm definitely not going to get E. coli or salmonella or something. I'm going to have a burger experience. I'm going to have a time. In any small town in America, I want a hamburger, I can go to an Applebee's. I don't have to go to, some 60-year running little hole-in-the-wall burger joint. But that said, I typically prefer something that would be featured on Guy Fieri's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and Dungeons and Dragons. But that Applebee's burger, it's there. It's always there for me. Waiting around the corner. Somebody to suggest, hey, let's play D&D 5th edition.
And I want to just reiterate that, like I said at the top of this episode, 5th edition D&D is my favorite edition of D&D. If I'm going to play D&D, that's what I'm going to play. And I'm currently playing 4 games of it in a week. So there's definitely something about it that I like. It is a good system. I I don't really play it for the mechanics. I played this game because it's what's available, and I can make a character whose personality is whatever I want. The mechanics are not going to get in the way of that.
Yeah, well said. I agree.
It'll do until 6th edition comes out. I hope they listen to people and upgrade, but yeah, it'll do for now.
So do you guys have anything for geek things?
I do. Want me to go ahead?
I just want to if we could have a moment of silence for the passing of Grant Imahara from Mythbusters. Had an aneurysm this past week, just dropped dead. I loved him on Mythbusters. World is going to be a little bit sadder because he's not in it.
Holy shit, I didn't even know this.
Yeah, and apparently I just learned this. The woman who replaced Carrie when she was on maternity leave, Jessie Combs, she died last year. But she went out a fucking badass way. She was breaking the women's world record for land speed on, I don't remember where exactly what it was, but she was driving a rocket car that she built.
Whoa, what a way to go.
I don't think I have any. No, I have one. Check out Sigi's lactose-free yogurt. It's really good. Tastes like regular yogurt, but if you're mildly lactose intolerant like I am, or worse, SIGGI is the company, and I just learned about it, and it's outstanding. There's my geek thing.
Nice. +1 yogurt. My geek thing is a YouTube channel. I don't know if we brought this up on the podcast before, but I recently discovered it and have been enjoying it. Guy's name is Tulok the Barbarian, and he's got this crazy long series where he just takes a character from fiction and shows you how to stat it out as the D&D 5th edition character. To be sure on the name, I just Googled it, and the top 3 that popped up were how to play Doomsday from DC Comics, the guy who killed Superman, how to play Mace Windu, and how to play Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. But yeah, he's done all 3 of the main characters from the Castlevania Netflix series, shitload of Star Wars characters, like all kinds of stuff. I've watched a ton of them, so check it out. Tulok the Barbarian.
All right, guys, what do you say we stop this bullshit and start rolling some dice?
100 dice.
Thanks for sticking with us for 100 episodes. If any of you people out there have listened to all of them, I'm so sorry for you.
Here's to 100 more.
Here's to that. I remember back, Jordan, whenever I very first pitched this idea to you, I said, you asked me what I would consider to be a success. Do you remember the number of episodes I said I would consider this to be a success if we reached?
No.
Wasn't it like 60-something?
It was 10.
Oh, wow.
We have 10x success.
Because 90% of podcasts fail before, or end before episode 10. So that's why I had 10 as my margin, or my metric for success.
Wow, we crushed it. Fuck yeah, guys.
Hey, if you really have been listening, send us some questions. Write in. Let us know what you'd like to hear. I'm curious. And yeah, really, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you.
And that's not a plea because we are running out of topics. I have a Google Doc that has a master list of all the topics, and the topics list grows faster than what we produce episodes. I want to say that right now the episode list is at like 180 topic ideas that I would like to talk about at some point.
Nice.
This has been a production of Alien Familiar Media. You can find past episodes and more at alienfamiliar.com. You can email us at alienfamiliarmedia@gmail.com. This production is protected under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution, no derivatives license. Music for this episode is Suburban Outlaw by Forget the Whale and can be found at freemusicarchive.org.